All right, welcome back to the Big Texas Podcast presented by Texas Young Republicans. I'm your host, Jordan Overturf, coming to you once again from RPT HQ in the heart of downtown Austin. We've got another candidate on the show today, but before we get to that, I've got a very important announcement. There are 2 days left in early voting for the special election runoffs in Houston and Fort Bend County. If you've been paying attention to the news at all, you will know that HD 28 has become a national focus. They are now saying that this race in HD 28 will set the tone for the entire course of 2020. Whether or not that's true in Texas or nationwide is yet to be determined, but we know one thing is for certain. Democrats from across the nation are pouring thousands of dollars into the race. They are supporting the Democrat candidate there. Presidential candidates, either failed or continuing their own private crusades, are coming in and endorsing the candidate. They are trying to buy this seat. Democrats from across the nation are trying to buy this seat in an effort to steal the narrative from Texas Republicans who are not going to allow this supposed blue wave to take over our state. So what I need you to do is get involved. First of all, if you live in Houston or Fort Bend County in HD 28 or HD 148, you need to get out and vote. Early voting continues through Friday, and Election Day is Tuesday, January 28th. If you don't live in this district and you still want to do your part to support Republicans, there is a statewide day of action. Texans for Greg Abbott is sponsoring a statewide deployment where they'll cover hotel and travel expenses for you. We've been pushing that out on our Young Republicans Facebook page. Make sure you go to either Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can find it there. We'll continue to push it out. We'll be messaging again to our base. But the point is that there is a day of action coming up this Saturday to get involved and show Democrats from across the nation and across the state that Republicans are not going to sit by and let their state be taken over. What you can also do is go and volunteer. Louis LaRota, young Republican, friend of the podcast, is running an HD 148 to turn that district red. For the first time ever, HD 148 has the potential to be represented by a Republican, and that Republican very well could be HYR member Louis LaRota, veteran, good guy. If you want to know more about Louis, you can go back to episode 1 and listen to his stance on policy, representing the community, all of those things. So again, if you have the ability to get down to Houston and Fort Bend County, there are ways for you to get involved. If not, you can still do your part from home. We have ways for you to get trained on a phone banking app so you can be making calls. If you know friends or family who live in these districts, make sure they are getting out and voting. Do your part to get the word out, get the vote out for these Republican candidates. Have I said HD 28 and HD 148 enough? I hope so. Again, if you want to find out more about that, follow Texas Young Republicans on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We're also pushing out information on the Big Texas Podcast platforms on Twitter and Instagram at Big Texas Podcast. Okay. My guest today is Joe Walz. He is a veteran. He is a small business owner in Richmond-Rosenberg area. And full disclosure, we're actually old friends. We grew up in similar circles. I lived actually on the Harris County side. He grew up in the Fort Bend County side, and one of his cousins lived next door to me. So I've actually known Joe for a long time. It's real interesting to see both of us on the paths that we are, but both young Republicans getting out there, trying to get the message out for future generations. So he is running as a Republican in the congressional district CD22, once held by Pete Olson. He is retiring and leaving an open field there. So there are lots of candidates in this race, and I really am grateful that Joe got a chance to come down to RPTHQ and sit down and talk to us about his message. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Joe Walz. This is a heck of a time to be getting into politics. I mean, you know, you come out of the military, start a business, you start looking around, you know, what spurred you to get into this kind of atmosphere?
Well, you know, I've always been interested. I've always supported candidates any way I could, whether it be financially or, you know, get out there. think my first campaign I worked on was about 18 years ago, holding up a sign for Gary Gates running in HD 28. So that was my first taste of politics. And yeah, I went off to the military, came back, brought a couple more Republicans. I had a couple daughters. So, and now I have a third, she's a tiny little baby. So over the next 18 years, what happens in the country is going to affect them greatly. And I want them to have the same opportunities. And I dang sure don't want them to stand in line for bread or experience any hint of socialism or Medicare for all or anything like that, because that's not the way the country's going to work for them at all.
Well, with your military background, does it get under your skin a little when you hear, Medicare for all and free college tuition when this country already has a pretty robust healthcare and education program for those who serve their country?
Yeah, absolutely. And VA healthcare and the military medical system, which is a little bit different than VA, is a prime example of what you don't want for the rest of America. It's excruciatingly long waits, and it's the joke is, what do you call the guy in med school that gets a D? And it's captain, because he's going to go to the military. But that's a joke. There's some very good providers, but the VA is socialized medicine, and it's very difficult and expensive to make that work for the veteran community. So, yeah, no, it is frustrating. It is frustrating.
Well, and as you look at, what's happening on the other side, clearly socialism and things like that are a big talking point. I think I saw a headline today that said Elizabeth Warren would be okay with no new houses being built in America.
Well, there goes all the construction work,
and growth and managed growth.
And that's real estate's the number one way that people create wealth. I mean, that's the biggest creator of wealth in the country.
Yeah, but on the other side of that, I guess the part of my question that I was trying to get to was, why do you think it is this country wants something for nothing? I mean, our veterans are going out there, they're putting their lives on the line, and there's so many benefits that come with it. Has this country lost its way? You and I are from the same generation of, you pick yourself up by your bootstraps and you go out and you earn your opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. Me, I didn't grow up rich or anything like that. I mean, it was work and make something for yourself, or get out of the way. My parents never encouraged handouts, or, we could have easily fallen into those Democrat principles and taken a handout, or that been our path, but that's just not Texas values. And yeah, it is frustrating because that's a big tool to recruit people also into the military, is the education and the healthcare and that kind of thing. So you're kind of removing a tool to encourage people to step up and do those things. But, it's just like when you see the ad and it's like, come pick up your free anything. And unfortunately, we have such a busy lifestyle. Just society is so busy and so it's information overload that they can't stop to see that, hey, nothing's free. And the country's $23 trillion in debt. That's the last moment when you should be giving anything away.
So, for people who didn't, grow up with you, kind of give them a little bit of your background, where you come from, and, what you've been up to, these last 20 years or so.
Yeah. No, so I grew up, born and raised in Fort Bend County, and did all my schooling in Fort Bend ISD. I enlisted as soon as I could. 14 months after 9/11, I begged my parents to sign the paperwork, and I left to the Army. I served all over the world, Iraq and Kuwait, Alaska, just literally all over the planet, and used my GI Bill, used some of those education benefits that I earned, and became a helicopter pilot. I came back home. My wife became a law enforcement officer. I started my company with $300, and me and family have built that into an FAA certified air carrier. So we're a charter company, and we started that with nothing, and it's because that's the American way. You can do anything. So that's been going 7 years now, and now I fly Life Flight in addition to running my business in the Houston area. So I have a pretty good insight of the healthcare industry in Houston, and everywhere from picking someone up from a ditch all the way to the hospital environment.
Yeah. Can you briefly break down, some of the complicated aspects of that, on the healthcare side of things?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Our nurses and our doctors spend more time explaining why somebody needed care than they do caring for somebody. The insurance companies will not cut a check unless they give them literally every number, and to include, every vital sign, every 2 minutes in some cases, and they have to document every one of those things instead of focusing on care. And so it's little things like that. There's a big picture healthcare wise. There's much bigger fish to fry, but something that's happening right now is price setting. They want to set prices and they want to lock prices in, and that's just not doable for a helicopter company. Those expenses are immense. So to lock something in and say, hey, no helicopter flight's going to cost more than $2,000, well, there's not going to be any more availability for air medical in the country, really.
And that's a huge need here in Texas, especially the rural parts of the state.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the number one. That's the number one thing for stroke and cardiac patients is how fast can you get them to that next higher level of care. And if you can keep that under an hour, you may have zero impact on your life, quality of life, or whether or not you live at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, and, since we've been growing up, Fort Bend County has changed a lot and become more of that kind of urban district. And certainly CD22 stretches a part of huge growth in Houston, right? When you're out there talking to voters, I'm sure healthcare is one of the issues that is high on their priority list. What are some of the other issues that voters are talking to you about?
People are frustrated with the national debt. They're encouraged by the economy. Donald Trump's done really good with the economy, and our country is flourishing. There's more jobs. There's opportunity. They're fearful of socialism. They're fearful that topic has gained traction with people like AOC and Bernie. So that's kind of where they're at on the economy and the budget stuff. You hear a lot about immigration and voter integrity as well. That's a huge deal to Republicans because they feel like no matter how hard they work, no matter what their grassroots effort is, if the entire cemetery is voting for a Democrat, they're in trouble, And that's maybe an exaggeration, but it's a huge deal in Texas, and we've seen those numbers.
Well, and it's not unfounded. I had someone reach out to me the other day and say that I believe he lives in an apartment, and he got voter registration cards for 5 other people who definitely don't live in that apartment where he lives by himself. So, there's a weird narrative going on there in terms of integrity in our elections process. Has there been any issues that you're at the door and a voter says, this is my priority, that has maybe surprised you or caught you off guard?
Not completely. I have heard Republicans that weren't very supportive of Donald Trump. I've had that question before. Mm-hmm. I've had both ways. If you don't support Donald Trump, I'm not going to support you. And if you do support Donald Trump, I don't want anything to do with you.
Yeah.
And so there's a divide in the Republican Party right now. And it may be a minority that feel that way. And I support the president. When his policies are working, I support him.
Absolutely.
If he's going to do something that's going to hurt CD22, then I'm not on board. I'm an individual, and CD22 is a unique district, and we're never going to fall in line just because the president thinks something's good. We're going to look at how it affects CD22 and vote that way.
Well, and so you're a young guy. The youth movement is certainly rising with AOC, but we've also got some younger guys in Dan Crenshaw, Van Taylor, Lance Gooden that have gone up this last session, and they're starting to get their feet wet in DC politics. What would be kind of your approach should you go on and win this election?
Well, you gotta capitalize on the efforts that they've made and the traction that they've gained. I've met Dan a couple times. I've had conversations with even Ted Cruz, and we've had good conversations. And they've made a name for themselves, and they've given themselves the ability to work into different committees and that kind of thing. And you got to piggyback on that and use that to your advantage. But the biggest thing is growing that young base.
Yeah.
In my district, people are concerned with the growth being certain demographics or ethnic groups. And what they fail to realize is the fastest and largest growing electorate is people 35 and younger, whether it be, the kids turning 18 or people voting for the first time in their life at the age of 30 or 32. And I think more and more people are looking to vote for the first time at the age of 30 or 32. They're finally starting to pay attention, and we have to excite them. You have to give them a reason to come talk to you. You have to give them a location and an environment where they feel comfortable approaching their congressman. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that maybe aren't approachable that way. And I think Dan Crenshaw's done really good at that, at being available and being comfortable in an environment that those people are comfortable in.
So are you specifically doing anything to reach out to young voters or help build that base? And when you do speak to young people who are under the age of 30, how do you talk to them about being a Republican?
Well, I just talk like I am. I'm a pretty average guy. So, the first thing you do is take off your tie a little bit, take off your jacket, put some boots on and kick back and maybe have a beer with them, just listen. That's the biggest thing, is they don't feel like they have a voice.
Yeah.
And you got to listen. Another thing we've done is 90% of my staff is an educator, an administrator at schools, that kind of thing. And they're in touch with the young generation, If you can't listen to their music without cringing or anything like that, it's going to be really hard to go to the places they like, because that's the music you're going to hear. But you got to be where they're at. And I think that's the number one thing is be accessible. Go to them, because most people, our age and younger, they just have too much to do. I don't have time to worry about who I'm voting for. I don't have time to listen to this, rhetoric. But if you'll go to them and say, hey, no, just talk to me about your job. Talk to me about finance. What do you want? What do you want to see for the country? What do you want to see for Houston? It's usually an eye-opening experience for them and you, because you'll actually get them talking.
So for you, what are those issues? When you look at it, you're still a voter yourself. What would you want from your own congressional representative?
I'd want access, right? So, are they going to collaborate with me? Are they going to listen to my ideas, or tell me I don't know what I'm talking about? Are they going to go to D.C. and do what they say they're going to do? Because that's huge. Everybody campaigns on kind of the same. When you're in a primary, everyone's got pretty much the same message. There's maybe one or two like sidebar, going down some certain rabbit holes that people do, but for the most part, everybody's talking about the same things. And you got to choose, in my case, between 15 people and decide, are they going to do that? Is that really what they're going to do? Or is this going to be a forgotten, platform until re-election? So that's huge to me. And then lastly is are they in it for me, or are they in it for them? Is this a political, step on a ladder, or are they really in it for the people? Are they really from here? Do they really want to represent this district the way this district has been over the last 35 years? And so it's important that someone be from that district and know the problems and know the people and how they see things on a grander scale. Do
you think that's a fault in our system, that, at the federal level, you don't actually have to live in the district to represent it?
I don't know if it's a fault. If it's a fault, it can be cured by the voter, right? If the voter's educated, they can see that from a mile away. And luckily for me, I think the GOP and the primary voters in Fort Bend County and Brazoria County see that, and they understand how important it is to have a local person, represent them in D.C.
That district was hit pretty hard when Harvey came through, right? And we saw the response from our representatives and our senators to try and bring some relief to that area in the immediate response. But long term, are voters still talking about Harvey? Are they still talking about what can be done to either address the mitigation side or the planning and zoning side, or have people already just forgotten Harvey even happened?
No, the people that were hit and the people that were affected and had their homes flooded and have lost everything, it is very fresh on their mind. 2.5 years is not a long time, and it takes a lot longer than that to rebuild an entire life. So no, the constituents really are still feeling the impacts every day. Whether it's their business or their home, and the representatives did really well to get action quickly. Long term, what I've heard talking to the members of the drainage districts is what the feds have done, what the Corps of Engineers do, is they get all this funding. And, for example, Pete Olson, who I'm trying to replace, he went to bat and he got funding. And he said, all right, the Corps got the money. They got the extra money they need. It's earmarked, so forth. And the drainage district said, okay, this is what our plan was. And the Corps said, yeah, that's a great plan. And they said, we got one too. And then whenever they looked at it, they went, man, our research is 20 years old. We got to restudy this. And instead of going with the local agencies and said, hey, look, they got a fresh plan that'll work, let's just implement that. Mm-hmm. They used the money that was, earmarked to restudy the entire thing. And it's time to stop studying. These people want to see tractors. They want to see dirt move. And they want to make sure that the next Harvey isn't going to affect them the same way. So it's very fresh on their mind. Zoning can help. It's a little irresponsible to zone residential areas in a floodplain that's literally designed to protect an entire city of 6.5 million people from flooding. But that wasn't, what can you do? Water's going to do what it does. Nobody planned the Barker Reservoir for the growth that we have.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, but it's a reality of geology. Really.
Well, and I grew up right next to that thing. So, when I was watching the reports and saw that, the reservoir is about to crest, I was like I could already see it, my childhood home completely just engulfed by those floodwaters. So it sounds like you're interested, though, in trying to cut down on the red tape and the bureaucracy and all the things that are stymieing the solutions that voters and citizens really want,
Yeah, absolutely. There's things that are bipartisan that have over 80% support across, both sides of the aisle. And you talk about things like term limits. I mean, that's got over 80% support, Dems and Republicans. You talk about things like a balanced budget amendment that gets overwhelming support on both sides. And those are the things that we need to tackle right away. If you could have a balanced budget amendment and, really start budget reform and do zero-based budgeting just like somebody does in their home or their business, we'll start tackling some of that debt. And that's going to free up, if we are going to help people, if we are going to impact more Americans, we have to do it from the point of zero, not from negative 23 trillion. We can't dig a bigger hole.
Yeah.
And I think that would gain a lot of support. I think, Republicans run on that constantly. And unfortunately, we had, and, something that really frustrates the constituents is we had all three chambers. We all had all three branches, rather. And we had the House, we had the Senate, we had the presidency, and we did nothing with it. I mean, just sat on our heels. And I think that showed, that showed in the midterms. It really did. And it's really frustrated people because you go to their door and they say, yeah, we're going to get it all back. And what are y'all going to do with it? And I wasn't even in the House and they're asking, what are you going to do with it? Y'all didn't do anything. It's y'all, and I'm the guy that's hoping to be the y'all. And that really frustrates people because they went to bat, they really worked to make sure that we had Republican control across the board and nothing happened. So we have to act on what we say, what we're running on needs to be acted on, especially if we get control of the House and keep the presidency.
Well, and you mentioned it earlier, we have a booming economy right now, right? President Trump gets reelected. I don't see that slowing down. So for you, what's the first thing you do when you get in office?
Well, hopefully it's to continue that growth, right? Let that keep going. The economy is great and we have a lot of growth, but it does nothing. President Trump has not reduced the budget at all. We're still spending more than we ever have. And part of that's, what Barack Obama did to the military. And there's history there. Carter did it to the military. Clinton did it to the military, and Obama did it to the military. So these Republicans get in, and it's very hard to reduce the budget because you're rebuilding the world's greatest military.
Yeah.
So that doesn't help. But we've got to set our country up for after Trump. So even if he gets elected for 4 more years, at the end of that 4 years, we still have a country and we still have debt. And we need to start reducing that. And I think that will set Republicans up long term if we can actually do something on that. If we can actually implement some health care ideas that work and lower the cost to replace Obamacare, which we failed to do 2016 through 2018, then I think that we will energize our base and we'll actually have people support Republicans across the board more.
Do you think people are actually scared that Medicare for all is a possibility, or is it more just the continuing shock of how big a failure that Obamacare was, in terms of affordability and access and all these things that were promised?
Well, every expert in the world said Obamacare wouldn't work. It's not a surprise. I don't think anyone's surprised. If they're surprised, they were listening to the wrong experts.
Mm-hmm.
But across the board, everyone was pretty sure Obamacare was going to be a failure. Medicare for all is a different fear, and the people that are maybe talking that fear up are people who have seen things like, the Cold War, and they've seen Soviet Russia, and they've seen what's happened in China and North Korea and seen those people starve. What our generation needs to look at is Venezuela, because 7 years ago, Venezuela was doing fine. Mm-hmm. They were just like us. They had all their rights. They had health care. They had all kinds of freedoms. And it only took 7 years to lose all of that and to be eating out of trash cans and standing in line for bread and to have stacks of money that were literally got you nothing.
Yeah.
And we have to draw attention to that, because that is Medicare for all. That's how it starts right there. If you control the health care, you start controlling a need, and that's a scary thing. So I don't think it's an unwarranted fear at all, because at this point we have a Democrat socialist presidential candidate in Bernie Sanders. So, we're literally one election away from really turning the tide.
Yeah.
And that's not an unwarranted fear.
I hate to kind of go down this route, but, what will it take to turn the generation around? There's a lot of divisiveness in our politics right now. How do we shed that and get back to responsible leadership?
You got to describe. You have to present the information a different way. Mm-hmm. Okay, and the Democrats have the advantage because it's really easy to say, "But mine's free." That's a very quick argument.
Yeah.
Our side of the argument is a little more difficult because it revolves around facts and statistics and figures, and that's a very boring thing to talk about. So, whether that's putting your information out there in video, in the little whiteboard videos that you see on Facebook, hey, if that's what it takes, that's what we need to do as representatives, as a party. We need to get that information out there in the quickest, most understandable format possible. If that means highlighting what's happened in Venezuela, then highlight it, But those things have to be exposed for what they are. And we're doing a really bad job of explaining that. I don't agree with Dan Crenshaw and everything. I have to say that because he's stepped on his own toes a couple times. Mm-hmm. But he's done a great job of explaining things in quick sound bites, quick videos that the younger generation can understand. That's what they have time for, is to, hey, if I don't catch it while I'm scrolling through Facebook, I don't have time for it.
Yeah.
And so that's where the advantage is for people like Dan Crenshaw.
Now, on an issue like immigration, that again, it seems like it has bipartisan support. We're just approaching it from different areas. When you're having these conversations with voters in the district, where are they now on the immigration issue?
Man, you hear every variant of a solution that you can possibly muster up. Overwhelmingly, most people say, yeah, a border should have a physical barrier. That's what makes a border a border. There's there's a problem there. So we have to continue building the wall where it makes sense and invest in technology for those agents. But immigration as a whole needs reform. Mm-hmm. This lottery system is incredibly ridiculous. To leave who we decide comes into our country completely to chance. What do we think about our liberties and what do we think about our country if we're willing to just kind of raffle it off and see what happens?
Well, and we've seen how that's come back to bite us, where some people get in and they do horrible things, and
absolutely.
Certainly the victims of those crimes don't feel like they've won anything.
No, absolutely. And it's it's across the board. So I've met with people. We've talked about EB1 and EB2 and EB3 visas and HB1 and every visa under the sun, and we have to overhaul the whole system. We have to end the status quo. If that means finding middle ground, then we need to find middle ground, because the status quo is ridiculous. We should not have the same topic be a part of both parties' platforms for 30 years. That means that nothing's been done, nothing effective, nothing. There's been no progress.
Yeah.
That's how you get, the Pelosi's and the Schumers talking about really using the exact opposite points that they made 10 years ago against us. And it's like, whoa. And the only way that's possible is when you have a complete status quo, when we can just go use that as kind of a stepping stone to launch a political career, to continue on, is to fight these fights that you've always fought. And so we got to end the status quo. And I don't know what that means. I don't know where we all come together and find a solution, but we do have to have secure borders. We have to protect our country from those that want to do harm. And not everyone that crosses that border wants to do harm. But one person, we've realized that one person can make a huge impact. One person can kill a lot of people with an airplane. So we can't just have, open borders. And when you combine open borders with something like Medicare for All that includes everybody in the country, well, you don't have a country anymore. We're done, and there's ways to stop that. Ending birthright citizenship is something that I think, would go a long way. That we got to end chain migration. We have to protect the borders. Long before we can have Medicare for All or anything close to it. We're asking for trouble, because if a caravan of 10,000 is eye-opening to people, wait till you have Medicare for All. I don't know any doctors that would continue practicing medicine under those circumstances.
Well, I'm sure the north half of the country would probably start going to Canada to, sample their Medicare for All.
Run away.
Yeah.
Run away.
Or just, quick pop across the border for a doctor's visit. And,
Absolutely.
Well, as we wrap up here, you're here by yourself. You don't have 14 other people that you're trying to, elbow out of the way or get, your point across. What is your message to voters? Here's your chance to give them the pitch. Why vote Joe Walz for CD 22?
Well, first, my team would be really upset if I didn't use the opportunity to ask all the young Republicans to go to votewalz.com and look at the whole platform. I am the only one that was born and raised there. I am the only one that started a business from $300 there. I'm the only one with healthcare experience. I'm a real leader. I'm not just coming out of left field. This isn't a political career that I'm trying to bolster. It's not something I'm trying to launch under a family name. I'm from there, and I want to serve the people that live there. That's first and foremost. Second, I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. If it's on my website, I'm going to try to do that. Whether that means going on CNN and Fox News and OAN, nightly and talking about it, then that's what it means. But if I put something on my platform, it's not a platform, it's a promise. So I will submit legislation that is for that purpose. If it goes anywhere, that's not really up to me. I'll do my best, but those are promises. And I ask that everybody, if you can contribute $5 or $6, that goes a long way, and I would appreciate every donation.
And give that website, social media, all that stuff.
Everything. Yeah, everything. Social media is at Joe Walz, WALZTX22, and the website is votewalz.com, and the last name is WALZ.
Brother, it was so good to see you again.
You too, man.
Thank you so much for coming on and do this, man. Best of luck in the race.
Thank you.
All right, thank you again to Joe for coming in to RPT HQ, sitting down with us. If you want to learn more about him, you can go to Joe Walz for Congress on Facebook, or you can visit his website, votewalz.com. Find him on Instagram at JoeWalzTX22. Again, a lot of candidates in that race for CD22. If you are interested in coming on the show, you can hit us up on Twitter and Instagram at Big Texas Podcast, or you can find us on Facebook, Texas Young Republicans on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And that is it for me today. I thank you again for listening. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We also push this out on YouTube, so I'm looking out for my Android users out there. But again, thank you for tuning in, listening. Share the message. Make sure that your friends and neighbors are getting informed about these elections. Until next time, friends, we'll see you down the road.